Hello everyone, and welcome. In recent years there's been a larger demand for crisp execution and efficient gameplay. Most often than not, every player strives to become the best, regardless of their skill or talents. With such great pressure comes great problems. New tech and setups crafted on a daily basis. How can one surely keep up? Luckily, with the variety of input devices and resources online, it's become much easier to perform at a higher skill level than it was in the past. But there is some difficulty finding archives that tailor to your specific needs. In my case, as a keyboard player, there is hardship in finding resources online to aid and assist. My hopes are to catalog some of these problems so that the next player doesn't struggle in the same way that I do. In this second episode, we will be dealing with 3 very useful techniques to most characters, but most importantly, Mishima characters. The reason being, we'll be dealing with easy mode electrics, easy mode light dashing, and easy mode Korean backdashing. Annotations and key bindings will be displayed on the screen once again as done before, and hopefully we're gonna hit the ground running with some of my favorite techniques in the game. Now, when it comes down to electrics, I have had very little success in my life as a Tekken player in executing this move. It is a legitimate just frame, though there is a little bit of leniency as compared to the just frames of the game, though it is still very hard to do. I found that my success rate on keyboard was relatively low, maybe on the left hand side on the player 1 side, which I believe was my strongest side, I could get 6 out of 10 electrics at best. On the player 2 side, which I call my weaker side or my forward 4 side, since I'm a Devil Jin player as well, I would like to say that my success rate dropped dramatically to about 3 to 4 out of 10 electrics at best. But luckily enough, after consulting some of the few resources I found online, I found some significance, just like in the movement video, in having dual key bindings for movement in the game. This was a great addition to Tekken 7, and I believe they put this for a specific reason. I believe the game allows you to use both sets of directions, your D-pad and your left analog stick if you're on joystick, or in the case of keyboard, multiple buttons to use both the D-pad and the left analog stick, because they realize that there is some merit in using both your hands to execute movement. It makes movement much easier, as shown with the Hayashida step, the snake dash. It makes it much more consistent to execute, and most definitely your execution levels just increase. You are able to execute the move faster. Now, talking about my history doing electrics, you can see the numbers are pretty low. It's very difficult to do, and I find it extremely difficult to do. But then utilizing the method of using dual inputs to execute electrics, it has made my life a whole lot better. In the live segment of the video, I will explain why. Moving on to light dashing or empty wave dashing, very fast, it's the same principle. If I were to execute a wave dash with one hand, and cancel it into another, and cancel it into another, and continue on and on, chances are, since I'm using one hand to execute one very fast movement, I will experience a lot of fatigue in the wrist, and I would lose control of the 2 fingers that are working the directions. Usually that's exactly what happens. You start off okay, and as the set progresses you get much more tired. But if you move half the work to your right hand, in this case the right hand being my dominant hand, the endurance demands decrease dramatically and the speed increases dramatically. Like I said in the live portion of the video, I will show you more in this regard. And with Korean backdashing, this is a very hard to execute technique. I find that due to my research, it's easier to Korean backdash on a pad Reason being, the buttons are so close together and allow for a lot of leniency. But when you're moving on to stuff like a hitbox, a mix box, or a keyboard, and I dare say some stick players, a Korean backdash is very taxing when it comes to endurance. But moving on to the live feed, hopefully you'll get to see what I'm talking about. So as I've stated before, we'll be dealing with 3 options that I believe every Mishima player should have, and something I've struggled with a long time, and I would like to thank some of the online resources I've found that have helped make some of these things a little bit easier. As I've said, key bindings and annotations have already been shown. You can go back and pause if you want to see what buttons I'm actually using, but I'm just going to state that I'm using W, S, A and D as my D-pad, and 6, T, Y and U as my left analog stick. So starting initially, we're going to be talking about electrics. But before we even go that far, forgive me, I would like to even talk about what the wave dash is. So a wave dash is executed by pressing forward and then immediately going down forward afterwards, similar to a Shoryuken motion if you play 2D fighters like Street Fighter. That's the animation that you get, technically speaking, if you complete a wave dash. Each button is a follow-up from a wave dash. Some characters have different follow-ups, some characters have more than others, but generally speaking, if you wave dash and attack, you get a follow-up, one of which is a God Fist. Electric Wind God Fist is achieved by getting the forward and the attack button in your down forward input exactly at the same frame. This is where the difficulty comes in, because like me, I used to only use one hand for my directions and one hand for my attacks. So I would have to press D, S, and then hope to press S plus D at the exact same time to get the down forward 2 at the perfect frame. This is very difficult, as I've stated before in the intro, very inconsistent in my part. But I found resources that said if you're a player on keyboard who uses 2 directional inputs, and I'm sure you could apply this to other input devices where you can have such a setup, you can press forward and down, which is the first half of the wave dash, and then use your second forward and your 2 input to execute the electric, since you'll be still holding down. So in this case, it will look something similar like this. This will be my hand notation: D, S, forward plus 2. U being my second forward, N being my 2. Now, the only caveat I can say about this is that if you're doing it too fast, you'll usually get a down 2 or a down forward 2, which in my opinion is okay. They are both safe options, especially considering that you missed an electric. If you had done a regular God Fist, as I've shown, that can be punished. So in this case, I'll demonstrate forward, down, and then forward plus 2. It's very consistent. It's possible to drop, like I said, if you do it too fast. But coming back from a situation whereby I would barely get any electrics at all on both sides, this is something I would gladly utilize as compared to not having an electric in my arsenal as a Mishima player. Moving to the left hand side, which used to be my weaker side, the player 2 side, we can still utilize the same mechanic. We have A and S as my forward and down, and then we have T as my going to the left. As I said, my second directions are 6, T, Y and U, where T is left. In the player 2 side, that would be the forward. This though, the hand motion is a little bit uncomfortable because you have to stretch over. You'll have to find something that works with you, whether you want to use your index finger, pointing finger, that's all up to you. But it's still the same principle of forward, down, and then forward plus 2 on your right hand. The key thing about using your right hand is that chances are the buttons will be pressed at roughly the same time. So let's try it. As you can see, it's still possible to drop, but coming from the background I have of barely getting any electrics at all, trying my best, this is definitely a big and much better improvement than getting very few electrics in a match. Very consistent, and I believe it works really well. We can use this same knowledge when dealing with continuous or fast wave dash cancels. We can use our right hand to press forward, and then we go S and D to complete the wave dash, and then we tap forward again with our right hand and continue to press S and D and continuously wave dash. I'll try execute it now. It's a bit tricky. You have to find the rhythm to it, but once you get it and practice it consistently, you will be able to get a decent wave dash. Mine is still a little bit janky, but the character does move. You get some decent movement, and though it may be something unsafe to do, it's something still worth noting that it's a possibility on keyboard, because most people will tell you that as a keyboard player you're not really using an optimal device. It might be much more comfortable, it might be much more efficient to use something like a hitbox, mixbox, or an arcade stick, or a pad, which is true. If you are raised on those devices, I'm sure the comfort levels are much higher than using something like this with so many buttons. It's very easy to miss, and to be honest, keyboards aren't really tailored for fighting games. As you can see, I am making mistakes, but at least as you practice and you get your rhythm correctly, you will get it. And the same principle, lastly, can be used to achieve the Korean backdash. This will require a little bit of time to explain, and I'm actually going to show the command history because I feel like it's needed. To complete a Korean backdash, you have to press back, down back, and back. That input that you see on screen right now, without the pause between the back and the initial down back, is how you can achieve a successful Korean backdash, which is cancelling a backdash into itself. Now, the difficulty with that is, like I said, the precision of pressing down back on keyboard is very difficult. As you can see, some of my down backs are coming with back inputs, showing that there was some delay in my button presses. It's hard to get the same frame with two different fingers. But luckily enough, you can negative edge in this game, similar to other fighting games, whereby a release of a pressed button still counts as a button press. So if I'm holding back and I tap forward, bear in mind U on the 1P side is my second forward. If I double tap that, I get a backdash. This is because the game registers me pressing the second forward. At this point, the game, technically speaking, doesn't know if I want to walk forward or walk backwards, so I stand still since both directions are being input at the exact same time. Once I release one, I get the input again of the second one. Same story if I hold forward and I release back, forward registers, and that's my negative edge. So in this case, I tap double forward and I get a backdash, but still that's not fast enough. If you look at the animation, it's still not fast enough. This is the speed of a regular backdash, so there's nothing special about that. So now we have to use our left hand and apply the same technique we used in the previous episode with the Hayashida step, except with down. We hold back, we double tap forward, and during the backdash animation, we tap down to cancel with a side step. Except the side step will not animate, you'll just get a very quick backdash. The reason why the side step doesn't animate is because, firstly, if you look on screen, you are getting the exact Korean backdash input, and secondly, since you are holding back, you can't walk back and sidestep at the exact same time. That's because down back is crouch, and crouches are the best ways to cancel your backdash, because the backdash is technically crouching, backdashing, crouching, backdashing, except the crouch is so fast you don't actually see it. And as a player, if you continue practicing this on both sides, you should be able to get a competent Korean backdash, and hopefully as a player you improve in that department. But like I said, using both hands to achieve one movement option means that when it's time to retaliate, there are some frames that are lost because the hand has to move from the left analog stick to the attack buttons. So you have to factor this in when you're looking at the frames. If I were to remember correctly, on the 2P side, I use my right hand to hold back, and in this case I double tap with my left hand. So if you're someone who's left-handed, your 2P side will be your stronger side, and then I press down either with my left hand or my right hand, like I said, depending on which one's your dominant hand. This relies solely on the left hand if you're on the 2P side, which is a bit difficult for me to press down with the left hand, so I'll try it with the right hand instead. Janky, but if you really think about it and channel your inner left hand, it's very possible. You'll always have a weaker side depending on what your dominant hand is, or what your not so dominant hand is, but you can figure it out how best suits you and what's comfortable for you. Some might want to hold back on the 2P side with the left hand and then backdash with the right hand. That's still a possibility. I might actually prefer doing this because, as you can see, the backdash is much cleaner and the right hand is the one at work. It's all about endurance and coordination with the left hand on the 2P side, because most of us are not left-handed, but it's still a possibility, and the fact that you can get a Korean backdash on keyboard is already benefit enough.